If you ask any F1 fan what they would love to see return to the sport, it would be the incredible sounding V10's from the turn of the century. These screaming monsters, with a 3-litre capacity and up to 1,000 brake horsepower, are the lasting memory of a childhood watching F1 for many of us. While the current 1.6-litre V6 hybrids have their advantages and are absolute marvels of engineering, in terms of the spectacle, they are a pale imitation of their bigger brothers from the late 90s and early 2000s. Ever since the change to the smaller engines happened, there have been calls for a return to the V10's, or at least a solution to the simpering sound the current V6s produce. Well, those calls may finally be answered, as the FIA is considering a switch back to a V10 engine, and it may be coming far sooner than you expect. Let's check it out. Next season is set to be a massive one for Formula 1. For the first time in 12 years, the engine regulations will be overhauled. The cars will still have the current 1.6-litre V6 engines, but with a greater hybrid component, and will now use sustainable man-made fuels. Formula 1 has always prided itself on being at the sharp end of the automotive development, and with the industry starting to move away from fossil fuels, having a combustion engine that uses sustainable fuel and a larger electrical component means F1 is right there. For the engine manufacturers, if they're investing hundreds of millions in developing these engines for Formula 1, they want the research that goes into those engines to be applicable to their current road cars. The FIA's decision to change the engines clearly worked as well. It pleased many of the existing manufacturers on the grid, while also drawing in Audi, Honda and Ford from next year, as well as General Motors in 2028. However, there are problems with the FIA's desire to work with the manufacturers, rather than make Formula 1 the pinnacle of motorsport it should be. The continued chasing of the approval of the manufacturers has taken away from the spectacle of Formula 1. This path that the FIA decided to tread eventually leads to Formula E. If the engine manufacturers of the world had their say, then the electrical component of the cars would continue to grow until the combustion engine part was just there for show, like an old sports trophy growing dusty on the sideboard, a reminder of its former achievements. When the sport set off on this path, it was the right choice. Manufacturers were abandoning F1 as it was an unfillable money pit. But now, F1 is profitable. There is enough to keep the manufacturers in the sport without compromising the spectacle to keep them around. With the changing fortunes of Formula 1, the FIA are starting to change their path and are eyeing a return to the beloved V10 engine. 3 days after F1 season launch in London, FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem posted a message on Instagram saying that, inspired by positive discussions on the future of the sport, the motorsport world should explore a range of directions for its top category, including the roaring sound of the V10 running on sustainable fuel. This is a point that fans have been shouting about since the announcement of sustainable fuels. If the cars are running on sustainable fuels, what's the need for the small capacity V6s? If the fuel is carbon neutral, then why can't we see a return of a 3-litre V10? And if the sustainable fuels are successful enough, then there is a situation where F1 could, and maybe should, ditch the hybrid element altogether and return to a full-on combustion engine. It is a point of view that is gaining supporters and momentum within the halls of the FIA. In China, FIA single-seater director Nicholas Tombazis was asked about the new power unit regulations and the comments made by the FIA president. He spoke about the options the sport has going forward and why a move away from 2026's hybrid V6s could potentially be beneficial. Certainly, the progress with sustainable fuels has led to views that maybe the engines could be simpler. The world economy does lead to views that maybe we should try to cut costs a bit more, and the current power units are way too expensive. That is a fact, Tombazis said. That's why the president made the comments about a V10 engine in 28 and so on. And that is something we are evaluating with the PU manufacturers. Over the past year, there has been a monthly story regarding the 2026 power unit regulations being changed. The consensus from the teams has always been that the train has left the station. They're already hundreds of millions of dollars deep in research and technology. Even for an F1 team backed by a massive car manufacturer, throwing that kind of money away isn't an option. 2026's engines are meant to be sticking around for at least 5 years. That means they should still be in use through the 2030 season. However, Ben Sulayem has suggested that we could have V10s back in the sport from 2028. Now, the FIA cannot just decide that the sport will use V10's from 2028 and tell the manufacturers to fall in line or leave the sport. The decision to cut the new regulation short has to be collaborative between the FIA and the manufacturers. It's a big decision to make, and the battle lines are already being drawn between those for a change and those against it. Before I talk about who sits where on the discussion though, if you're enjoying the video and want to catch more of the news and analysis from the upcoming F1 season, then make sure to give the video a like and subscribe to F1 Reverse. Thanks a lot. So where do the current manufacturers sit on this discussion? Who's in favor and who's against it? Well, first, let's outline what the manufacturers have to gain from a change of engine. The 2026 regulations engines are incredibly expensive to make and excessively complex according to the teams. Sweeping changes could reduce the cost and complexity, making them easier to run, maintain, build, and importantly, experiment with. Moving away from the 1.6-litre hybrid to something different would also allow a competitive reset. While the 2026 regulations are a change from the current ones, they are not a complete reset. The current manufacturers, especially the likes of Mercedes, who have had the best engine in the sport since 2014, have a massive knowledge base with a huge amount of historical development work they can draw on, which the newer manufacturers such as Audi and Red Bull cannot match. But this argument isn't as simple as old manufacturers versus new, though Red Bull are one of the teams in support of an early termination of the 2026 regulations and a switch to a V10 powertrain. Team boss Christian Horner said that the introduction of sustainable fuels opened up all kinds of options. I think the purist in me would love to go back to a V10 that was done responsibly with sustainable fuel. If that was reintroduced, the sound of Grand Prix racing, it's an interesting concept and one to certainly look for after this current set of regulations. Despite his complaints about the 2026 regulations, having said last year that the regulations need a major rethink, even Horner has admitted that a change for 2026 is now impossible. He said it was 10 past midnight and Cinderella has left the building to make a serious change in direction in the upcoming regulations. Ferrari are also believed to be taking the side of a return to the V10's as soon as possible. They've only produced one car in the last 60 years that had a V6 engine, the 3-litre 296 GTB from 2022. The word from within Ferrari is that they would be much happier with a larger capacity V10, which would offer more transferable knowledge for their road car production. Lewis Hamilton, who is very close to the Ferrari president John Elkann and is believed to be designing a Ferrari car for the brand called the F44, is one of the most vocal supporters of the V10. It's no secret the V6 has never sounded great, he said. I remember the first time I came to a Formula 1 race in 1996 in Spa. I remember arriving and Michael coming through turn 1 and my rib cage was vibrating. I was so hooked, like it was the most amazing thing that I felt and heard before. Over the years, we've lost that. So if we're able to move back to those amazing sounding engines and we're still able to meet the sustainable goals, why not? Along with those two, General Motors could be in support of it. The earliest they have an engine ready for use by Cadillac is 2028, and with their development of an engine still in the very early stages, a switch to a cheaper, less complex V10 would favor them, as would the competitive reset a move away from the 1.6-litre V6 hybrid would provide. However, Red Bull, Ferrari, and Cadillac will face opposition from the likes of Mercedes and Audi. Mercedes have mastered the V6 hybrid engine used in F1 over the past decade, and are expected to be a frontrunner in 2026 because of that. If they have a competitive advantage, they won't want to give that away by cutting the new regulation cycle short. They also have much more interest in developing hybrid engines, with their road-going cars leaning more and more toward electrification. This view is shared by Audi. Having committed to creating a turbo hybrid for the 2026 rules, Audi has emphasized the relevance of those engines to its road car program and the importance of the 2026 rules to its decision to commit to F1 at all. In a statement given to the race relating to the talks about abandoning the turbo hybrids for V10's, Audi said, "The upcoming regulation changes, including the new hybrid power unit regulations set for the 2026 season and beyond, were a key factor in Audi's decision to enter Formula 1. These power unit regulations reflect the same technological advancements that drive innovation in Audi's road cars." For the 2026 engine regulations to be cut short, the decision between the manufacturers would have to be unanimous. They all signed up for the 2026 1.6-litre turbo hybrids. They all committed to investing hundreds of millions into them. And when they did so, they all expected to be reaping the rewards of that investment for at least 5 years. That isn't to say an early change can't happen just because Audi are opposed to it, but they will require some convincing. Would you like F1 to return to the V10 engines? Do you think it could happen early, or are there too many hurdles that would need clearing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.